Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Wheel, Resident Human, out March 26 on OMN Label Services. This album has 7 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a prog metal band from Finland. Now this album has an interesting structure, perhaps a structure that I haven't really seen anywhere else. At least I don't feel like I've experienced a record like this elsewhere. Think about each song as a room, and then each room is connected to the next room through a hallway. In some cases that hallway is really long, and in some cases that hallway is very short. You open a door to exit the room, and as you're exiting the room, you're nearly entering the next room. Sometimes you get that feeling. Sometimes the path is a little bit longer and allows you to kind of lose yourself in it. So it's an album that lives off of the quality of the 7 tracks. They have their own ecosystem, they have their own way of existing. When you're in that room, you're really experiencing what that room has to offer, not really considering what will be next or what came before. It's all about where you currently are and what's around you. Once you exit that room, you feel sometimes that the path is very linear and it takes you straight into the next track, almost connecting the two directly. Sometimes you navigate a little bit in between them. But that's the beauty of the record. It allows you to have 7 different experiences, but they're not broken in between them. They're really well interconnected with this incredible hallway of sound and experience and emotion that this record has in store for you as far as the overall structure is concerned. Then once you get into the soundscape, the album is very rich. Phenomenal, actually. I love how good it sounds. It has depth, it has layers, it has quality of approach, quality of execution. It's an album that sounds phenomenal across all the elements. You can hear what each and every single one of the elements is doing in its own way, but you can also feel that all the pieces are coming together in order to paint you a full picture of what this record has in store for you. So I love the execution, I love the sound quality, and for an album that has this much emotion, that has this much atmosphere built in as one of the layers of the sound experience, you really need to have quality above everything else in order to really paint the full picture, the full essence of the record, allowing the listener to get lost in it, but at the same time still understand exactly what is happening. Now, once you get into that soundscape, there are 3 elements that drive the experience: bass, drums, guitars. Let me start off with the bass. I love the bass on this record. Phenomenal. Not hidden. In the forefront. It's one of the driving forces. Not the main driving force, but the fact that they allowed it a spotlight and they allowed it to shine bright on what it's doing for the record, on what it's doing for the sound, in my opinion, is magnificent. It really adds a different feel. It adds a different layer. It adds a different look to the overall sound experience and how you process this album. Then you get into the drums. The drums perhaps is the one element that I wasn't really fond of because I felt like it was too inconsistent. It was very flat at times, very thin, losing itself in the overall soundscape, losing itself within the layers, not giving the record the foundation that it needed. And in some tracks, it finds its way back. It finds that groundness. It grounds itself. It starts to build the pillars and it starts to build that foundation. But the inconsistency of approach from track to track and even within the tracks themselves don't really make the drums feel like as strong as they could be on an album that has this sort of sound. I understand you wanted to create layers, you want to create a sound that dissipates throughout the experience, but at the same time you still have to give the listener something to hold on to on a consistent basis, something that stays almost untouched, unmoved throughout the whole record. And the drums perhaps could have been that, but they weren't. Then you move on to the guitars, very dynamic. The guitars are the driver of this record. I really don't have any doubts about that. They push all the different elements, they push all the right pieces, they turn all the right knobs. They push the melody, they push the melancholy, they push the overall experience, they push all the emotions that this album has, and there's a lot of emotions to unpack from this record. So I felt like the guitars were a little bit outside the box, or perhaps they didn't have a box, so they could go anywhere they wanted to go. They could give you a different feel, a different look within the songs, from song to song, and they never really allowed themselves to be disconnected because they always find a way of weaving themselves back into the starting point of the record and into the starting point of each and every single track. Last but not least, we have to talk about the vocals. In my opinion, that is the bright spot of this album. Phenomenal. The same way we can talk about the quality of the overall sound, we can talk about the quality of the vocals. A lot of where the vocals goes is determined by where the guitars are going. I didn't feel like the vocals were outside the box, but definitely they had a really large box. The parameters were very wide, and they used everything at their disposal. but you could almost feel where the guitars are going as far as the emotional presence of the song is exactly where the vocals are following. The two are interconnected on every single track, and they really dictate all the motions, and they really dictate the pace, the tempo, and everything that this album has to offer. But the quality of approach is phenomenal. I love the backing vocals. Most of the time they add a different essence, they add depth, they add a different look, not necessarily creating heaviness, but they definitely create a different atmosphere, a different way of you processing the tracks, and I think it's a very important aspect within this record. But the changes in mood, the changes in intensity, the changes in aggression that you get out of the vocals is very important, because it really allows you to understand exactly where you are within the record, but most important within the songs, because you're really living within those 7 ecosystems as you progress through this record. Overall, I feel like this is an album that shows the growth of the band. When you look at what they've done before, you look at this now, this is a band that understands exactly what they want to do, what they want from their sound, and most importantly, they know how to execute it. Having said that, at times I felt lost within this record. The album failed to grip me to it. I would lose myself in the soundscape, I would lose myself in the emotion, and perhaps that's exactly what they wanted, but I never really felt connected with the album. I never really felt like I understood exactly where I was within the album itself or within the tracks themselves. And this is an important element, and like I said, I think that's what they wanted, but you still need to give me something to hold on to, so that while I might be lost in the fog of sound, in the fog of the experience, I still know nearly where I am, or I know exactly where I'm going, and I can hold on to something to make that journey a little bit less mistaken. Like, I'm not completely blindfolded walking through a maze. I have my groundings, and at times I felt like I had absolutely zero knowledge of what was around me. I was just too lost within it to really understand what was happening, and that happens frequently throughout the record. And what it does is it allows you to walk away from the experience. It allows you to zoom out of the album, and you want the listener to always be grounded. You want the listener to be connected 100% of the time. You may want the listener to experience that loss. You may want the listener to experience that ability to walk through a maze and feel lost in the fog of sound, but you don't want the listener to disconnect from the record. And at times I felt disconnected from this record. Now, as far as songs are concerned, I want to start off with Dissipating. This is the opening track of the album, a song that eases you into the record. It has a very nice way of opening the doors of the record, allowing you to walk in it with a very melancholic approach. A track that gains intensity both musically and vocally, but it always brings you back to that starting point. So it really has two different approaches merged in one. It has incredible peaks and really deep valleys, and you're always navigating from one to the other. But it's a track that goes full circle. As it starts is pretty much the way it ends. It allows you to kind of lose yourself in it, find yourself again at the end of it, and just enjoy the atmosphere and depth that it has all the way throughout. A track that also gives you a little bit of everything you're gonna get throughout this record. By opening itself with 11 plus minutes, you start to feel like this is where the album is gonna go, this is where it's gonna stay, and this is the experience that I'm gonna get from the next 6 songs. And that's exactly what this song has in store for you right at the top. Next, Hyperion. The bass on this song is phenomenal. It's really one of the elements that jumps into the forefront, that becomes very predominant. It's a very dynamic track, pushing some volume, but it also pushes a lot of heaviness. That volume becomes heavy at times. So it's a track that has a little bit more bite, has a little bit more strength in how it comes across. The vocal tone and delivery blends perfectly well with how the song is driven musically. Where the sound is going is exactly where the intensity of the vocals are following. So the two are interconnected as you progress through this track. It's a song that expands and contracts at the same time, or nearly at the same time, so it has these incredible peaks and valleys as you move along it. Last but not least, my favorite song on the album, Resident Human. Great guitar sound. If the previous track had great bass sound, this one has great guitar sound all around. It really dictates where you go. The drums and bass create the necessary foundation for this track to be as powerful, as enigmatic as it is. It really draws you in, and it doesn't just draw you in, it holds you in, it holds you in place. You don't want to walk away from this song. You want to enjoy every element that it has to offer, and you want to enjoy everything that's coming around the corner. A track that allows the vocals to be the co-pilot of where the guitars are taking you. But the two working really well together while the bass and drums are creating the pillars, are creating the roadmap in which guitars and vocals can travel on. Really allowing you to enjoy every single thing that it has to offer. Has a lot of heaviness, has a lot of intensity, has a lot of aggression, but it also has a lot of melancholy and melody built into it. So a very interesting, powerful track all around. This is it. This is Wheel with Resident Human, once again out March 26th. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.